Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Sriram V Ayer. I've always been very narcissistic in life. I like to talk about myself, which has always had problems with my friends or my family. But most of the time I seem happy, but it's also a question I've tried to live with. I've tried to mask my indecisiveness. I'm always a very curious person that has always brought me to a lot of trouble. This is someone who's like my father. When I started my graduation, I think quite like yours, I was somebody who's completely interested in too many things. I'm sure most of you are. Very unclear about what I really wanted to study, what interested me, what kind of a job I really wanted in life. So sooner I decided that I have to finish, take a group in my 11th and 12th standards. My father was a chartered accountant, so I said, okay, let me try a hand at chartered accountancy. So I got into commerce, but besides everything else, I was running a company while I was at school, trying to teach children and others how to remember, how to memorize before you take an exam. So that went on its course. And while I was at college, I had other ideas too. So I was suddenly not very excited about accountancy, not about chartered accountancy. So it took a lot of persuasion and a lot of anguish of my father. I'm sure much of you can recognize and quite feel the same. I'm sure a lot of your fathers and mothers are going through the same as we are, right? Now, the challenges went ahead. I was still unclear about whether I was doing chartered accountancy. I did my technology, but finally I decided I might possibly do advertising, okay, from everything all over the place. Now, the challenge then comes in. My father asked me a question. What are you good at? I think it might be a good place to start that career choices from there. What am I good at? That's a very difficult question. I'm generally interested about a lot of things, and that's the problem too. And so then I decided there is something that I am good at, which I can talk. So I would rather pick up on a career which would make me talk. So I decided after finishing advertising, my first job was in client servicing for a leading advertising agency in Chennai. But I decided with other inputs that were coming in, and that was late 2000 when the dot-com boom was happening. So I decided I might have to possibly look at opportunities in the technology sector. So I joined a company which was beautifully doing some amazing world-class technology products in the Netherlands. So I was off to Netherlands and working in Europe and in the US and looking at everything else around there, making enough money, taking opportunities by my side. Well, having great fun at life too. Love happened. You're having fun with your girlfriend, traveling around, making potloads of money. Life was fun. Then something happened. I was not really a person who was generally interested in social work, but I was always having a life which, because you live in India, you brought up in an upper middle class life, you see poverty around you, but you've never had the real contact with it. 2002, I happened to be in Gujarat. This was May of 2002 in Baroda to meet a client actually, but that's the time when the Gujarat riots had kind of started out and simmering and violent. Seeing violence up and close is quite different. I don't know how many people have read enough about these riots. Close to 3,000 people were killed. I'm not getting into the politics of who was responsible for it. These are human lives that was killed. And what was more surprising and more difficult for me was these are not mostly thugs who did it. These were people like you and me, born in good homes. Why did we do that? What made us so violent? What makes us that we normally not do something to children, to women, to people whom you lived with long enough, and you still did it. So starting from that, I moved on to a space wherein we are all bad people, and we possibly need a policeman or a god to act as one, otherwise we would be animals. So there is this animal instincts that is waiting to come up in the fort, which will otherwise which otherwise we are very humane people and humble people. But as I went along, I still continued my job. To begin with, there was this story that I always very passionately share most of the time. It's very true only in India. This is a typical street in an urban city, right? So you see the cycles, the motorists, the buses all in one place. How many people drive a car here? The person who's driving a car feels that he deserves the right of the road because he has a wider car, his car can move faster, and so he deserves the right of the road. You'll also find a cyclist who's actually using human effort. He has very little space left of the road because it's pedestrians and shoppers and hawkers, everything. So he decides that the middle of the road is possibly easier to navigate, so I might as well be there. The person in the car and the person who's driving the cycle have possibly legitimate aims, but each contrasting needs. Both of them cannot drive at the same time at the same place. Much of a society is like that. We do not know the other person who is living at all. We do not know the other man's compulsions. We do not know what he likes, what he does not. We have two different kinds of Indias that are growing. And two different kinds of Indias we gleefully pass through without even having conversations with. And as we move ahead in life, we realize that these are the people whom we start hating. These are the people who we think that they are on for taking over our lives. And we want to protect it. And at some point in time, we act very violently to the other person. Lots of questions, still no answers. These were not questions I was seeking to start a social work organization. But these were questions that were very spiritual in nature without finding answers to it. This was 2004 late, December. My earlier company, we used to have a development center in Chennai. This was Hadders Road in Nungambakam. 8 o'clock in the evening, we have a disaster at one of our client sites in Australia, busy working. In walks a little boy who comes into my cabin and says, "Do you want to buy agarbattis?" My first reaction was, how on earth did he get inside? With access cards and security. And my first thought to him was, sorry, I have sinus and I cannot take incense sticks. Agarbattis irritate me. This colleague of mine who was sitting next to me nudged me and said, you don't have to be such a dork. You can actually buy them, not use them at all, or maybe give it to me. But there's something very curious about the boy. The boy was coming from Korukupettai, which was close to 15-20 kilometers away from the city. He was very neatly dressed, well-oiled hair. He was carrying a backpack. But very clearly I remember he was not wearing any footwear. His mother made those agarbattis during the day. His father had run away from home long time back. He goes to school during the day, and in the evenings he set foot on different parts of the city to sell these agarbattis and make a living for himself. That was something very inspiring to me. I'm sure we met these kind of boys at different parts of the city, but my own experience of dealing with these questions post-Gujarat led me to believe that if this was a boy who's hardworking, who's willing to study, who's perseverant, and what possibly is lacking for this boy is inspiration, a certain amount of mentoring and information, what can I do more than what I'm doing today? And what if there was another individual who's an adult who's educated, who's slightly prosperous, who is willing to spend that time in mentoring this child. And in the process, two sets of communities can talk to each other. And in this process, there is communication happening about each other's challenges, all with the sole purpose that this child can be a better person later. Suddenly, this was a huge eureka moment. A moment where I suddenly believed that there is a possible solution. And that moment, I decided, well, this is what I'm going to do. My indecision was not more something troubling me. And then I started Nalanda Way Foundation. In a week's time, I quit my job, actually, because I really knew what I had to do. This was something that was troubling me for 2.5 years, and I said, okay, this is something a child is, and mostly women as well, are the most affected in conflict zones, but we're going to start working with children. The challenge was about how can we make children talk about their lives? How can we make, this is something that always faces somebody who gets out of a job, right? Your pocket's empty. But the challenge that was more troubling me was, well, that's the sad part of the story. When you start leading your own life and start making decisions for yourself, your lover suddenly decides you're no more bankable and maybe something needs to change in her life, and she says, okay, thank you very much, now you can move on to yourself. But children, there is something very, very interesting about them. So we started out as a volunteer-driven exercise, wherein there is a person who is willing to spend the time with a child at least 2 hours every week. What started out as a volunteering program, then we realized that the children who are not in school, who are not studying, the biggest challenge is not that they don't have the other emotional skills. They don't want to stay in school because education is no more relevant. I don't like what I'm doing at school. Now, if the school and the education is no more relevant, I don't like it. Now, how can that be more relevant? How can learning be more fun? Then we decided, how about teaching history through storytelling? How about teaching literature through music and dance? Now, we suddenly realized that when teaching becomes fun, then I'm not placing effort on the whole process of learning. I'm sure in your school time, there were teachers who taught you something which you still remember because it fired your imagination. It made you believe that learning, the process of learning, is more fun than the outcome of actually exams. I'm sure all of you recall that. I'm sure you have teachers here in this college who are firing that imagination. So we decided that we're going to make arts, all forms of that, the performing, the visual, the fine arts, the craft, the photography and filmmaking, and make that bring alive inspiration and world all around children. So today we work with children who have been rescued from child labor, who've been rescued from bonded labor, who are juvenile delinquents, who have committed crimes, children who have lived in sex work, children whose fathers have been taken in as terrorists in Kashmir, children of bandits in Bihar, will all with the purpose, can the arts heal them? Can it rehabilitate them? Can arts make them a person who is non-violent, who is peaceful at heart? There's one child that I want to talk about. This is a child who killed his own father because his father was extremely abusive to his mother. He was taken into the juvenile home in Tanjavur. So we started working with them. Within 6 months' time, he was also mentally challenged and disturbed because of the kind of violence that is seen at home. This child, at the age of 14, kills the warden of the home again and runs away again. He was brought back to the home again. The main intervention that we worked with him was teaching music to the kid. Today, he's someone who's completely at peace with himself. He's someone who believes that he has a life before him. He's someone who's confident that he is possible. There are hundreds of children like that we work with. This is a little bit of a snapshot of what kind of work that we do. To bring arts and create a world that is completely different, that they can live, that they're so confident, that they're so happy, and they're so non-violent about it. So we work with 17,000 children today on a direct, ongoing basis. Thank you. These are the kind of companies and organizations which support our work. Well, there is another question again too. We have 200 million children in this country. 17,000 is just a drop in the water. Can this 20 minutes or whatever I spoke inspire you to take and look at the children around you? And what can you do? Think about it. And there's so much that you can do. I'm sure you're all very intelligent, very capable people. Think of something that you can give before you take from this world. Thank you so much.